It was a freezing winter night in New York City. Snowflakes danced in the air, and the wind howled through the empty streets. Inside his shiny black car, William Carter, a young millionaire, leaned back in his leather seat, scrolling through his phone. William had everything: a successful business, a mansion, and more money than he could ever spend. But something always felt empty. His driver, Mr. Jenkins, stopped at a red light. As William glanced out of the window, he saw something that made him sit up straight. A young girl, no older than 16, stood near a bench, clutching two crying babies wrapped in thin blankets. Her face was pale, her lips trembling from the cold. "Stop the car," William said suddenly. Mr. Jenkins looked at him in surprise but obeyed. William stepped out into the biting wind and walked towards the girl. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked softly. The girl flinched and took a step back. "Please, sir, I don't want trouble. We're fine." "You're not fine," William said firmly. "You're freezing, and those babies, they need warmth. Come with me. I can help." For a moment the girl hesitated, but when one of the babies let out a weak cry, she nodded. Inside the warm car, the babies stopped crying, and the girl sighed in relief. Her name was Emily, and the babies were her twin siblings, Oliver and Olivia. "Where are your parents?" William asked gently. Emily lowered her head. "They're gone. I've been taking care of them on my own." William's heart clenched. He had never felt so protective of anyone before. "You don't have to worry anymore, Emily. I'll make sure you and the babies are safe." They arrived at William's mansion, where his staff hurried to prepare warm food, clothes, and a cozy room for Emily and the twins. As Emily fed the babies by the fireplace, William sat across from her. "Emily," he said softly, "you said your parents are gone. But what happened?" Emily hesitated, her eyes filling with tears. "Mr. Carter, there's something you need to know. The truth is—" And just as she was about to speak, a loud knock came from the mansion's front door. Who could it be in the middle of the night? William exchanged a look with Emily before he stood up to answer the door. William walked cautiously to the massive wooden door and pulled it open. Standing in the freezing cold was a tall man in a dark coat and hat. His piercing eyes locked onto William's. "Good evening, Mr. Carter," the man said in a deep voice. "I believe you have something, or rather, someone, that belongs to me." William frowned. "Who are you, and what are you talking about?" The man smirked slightly. "The girl, Emily, and those twins. They're not yours to keep." From behind him, Emily gasped. She had followed William to the doorway, clutching one of the babies tightly. "No, please, William, don't listen to him. He's lying." The man's cold eyes shifted to Emily. "Enough, girl. You know what happens if you disobey me." William stepped in front of Emily protectively. "You need to leave now before I call the police." The man's smirk faded, and his voice turned sharp. "This isn't over, Carter. You have no idea what you've stepped into." With that, he turned and disappeared into the snowy night. William quickly closed the door and locked it. Emily was trembling, her eyes wide with fear. "Emily," William said gently, "who was that man?" Emily hugged the baby tightly, her voice barely above a whisper. That was Mr. Black. And if he's found us, it means we're in terrible danger." William's jaw tightened. Whatever was happening, he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let anything happen to Emily or those babies. The following morning, William had his security team inspect every corner of the mansion. Cameras were checked, and guards were stationed at every entrance. But Emily still looked terrified, clutching Oliver and Olivia closely. "Emily," William said as he sat beside her on the sofa, "you need to tell me everything. Who is Mr. Black? And why is he after you and the twins?" Emily hesitated, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Mr. Black, he was my father's business partner. My dad found out he was doing something illegal, smuggling things, dangerous things. When my father tried to stop him, Mr. Black, he had my parents killed." William's eyes darkened with anger. "And now he's after you because—" Emily nodded. "Because my father left behind evidence. Evidence that could put Mr. Black in prison forever. And I have it. William stared at her, realization dawning on him. Emily, where's this evidence? Emily's hands shook as she reached into her bag and pulled out a small, weathered envelope. It's all in here, she whispered. William took the envelope carefully, knowing that its contents could change everything. Before William could open the envelope, the power suddenly went out. The entire mansion was plunged into darkness. Emily gasped, clutching the babies tightly. Stay here, William said firmly. Don't move. He grabbed a flashlight from a nearby drawer and stepped into the hallway. The faint beam of light illuminated the grand corridor, casting long shadows on the walls. Somewhere in the distance, he heard faint footsteps. William followed the sound, his flashlight trembling slightly in his hand. The footsteps led him toward his office. As he reached for the door handle, he heard a faint clicking sound, a lock being tampered with. With a deep breath, William pushed the door open and shone his flashlight inside. A shadowy figure stood by his desk, rifling through papers. Stop right there, William shouted. The figure froze for a moment before bolting toward the window. William lunged forward, grabbing the figure's arm. The intruder twisted free, dropping something on the floor before leaping out the window into the darkness. William picked up the object, a small flash drive. From behind him, Emily's voice called out softly. William, what is it? He turned to face her, his expression serious. I don't know yet, Emily, but whatever is on this drive might change everything. William inserted the flash drive into his laptop. Files and folders appeared, and his eyes widened as he began to understand the extent of Mr. Black's criminal empire. William scrolled through the files, his face hardening with every revelation. Mr. Black's empire wasn't just criminal, it was vast, global, and deeply entrenched in corruption, trafficking, and violence. Names, transactions, and locations were all meticulously documented. This flash drive was a blueprint of his entire operation. Emily stood behind him, clutching Oliver and Olivia. Is that enough to stop him? She whispered. William nodded grimly. It's more than enough, but we have to act fast. If he knows we have this, he won't stop until he gets it back. As if on cue, the mansion's security alarms blared. The sudden sound made Emily jump, and the twins began to cry. William grabbed his phone and called his head of security. What's going on? Sir, the guard's voice was tense. We've got intruders on the property, multiple vehicles approaching from the east gate. William hung up and turned to Emily. Stay here, lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me. But William, no arguments, he said firmly. I'll handle this. William grabbed a pistol from his desk drawer and rushed toward the entrance hall. The sounds of shouting and commotion grew louder as the intruders clashed with his security team. Through the massive front windows, William saw armed men advancing across the snow-covered grounds, their dark figures illuminated by the headlights of black SUVs. At the center of it all, standing like a commander overseeing his army, was Mr. Black. William's jaw tightened. He stepped outside onto the front steps, gun in hand, and called out over the chaos. Mr. Black, this ends now. Mr. Black looked up at him and smiled coldly. You're right, Carter. It does. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the night. A gunshot. William ducked behind the stone railing as bullets whizzed past him. His security team returned fire, holding the attackers at bay. But the fight was far from even. Inside the mansion, Emily huddled in the locked room, tears streaming down her face. The twins wailed, sensing her fear. She knew William was risking everything for them, and she couldn't let it be for nothing. Gathering her courage, Emily grabbed the envelope and the flash drive. She scribbled a quick note and slipped it into the envelope before tucking it into a diaper bag. Then, taking a deep breath, she opened a hidden door in the room, a servant's passage William had shown her earlier. As William fired back at the attackers, a sudden burst of headlights lit up the driveway. Police cars roared onto the scene, sirens blaring. Someone had called for reinforcements. The sight of the authorities scattered Mr. Black's men, who fled into the night. But Mr. Black didn't run. Instead, he stood his ground, glaring at William with a murderous intensity. Two officers approached him cautiously, guns drawn. It's over, Black, William said, stepping forward. You're done, Mr. Black smirked. You think you've won? This is far from over. But as the officers cuffed him and led him away, William felt a wave of relief. Inside, he found Emily and the twins safe in the hidden passage. She handed him the envelope and the flash drive. "I added a note to the evidence," she said, her voice trembling, "for the authorities, to make sure they know everything." William nodded, his respect for her growing. "You're brave, Emily. Braver than most people I know." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and media frenzy. The evidence on the flash drive led to the dismantling of Mr. Black's empire and the arrest of dozens of his associates. Emily, Oliver, and Olivia were finally safe. But for William, it wasn't just about safety, it was about family. Over time, he became a father figure to the twins and a mentor to Emily, helping her rebuild her life. His once empty mansion was now filled with laughter, warmth, and purpose. For the first time, William Carter felt whole,